In 2023, Chief Petty Officer Robert Johnson, the last surviving member of Admiral Byrd's crew, ended decades of silence to share his account of Operation Highjump. According to Johnson, the mission uncovered far more than routine Antarctic training. He described a vast fissure in the ice that gave off heat, a steady vibration in the air, and a tunnel made of material unlike rock or metal, yet resembling both. Of those who entered, one never returned, and another emerged changed, never speaking of it again. So what did Admiral Byrd's team really uncover beneath the ice? Before his passing, Johnson, the last surviving member of Admiral Byrd's legendary expeditions, chose to share his long-guarded memories of those distant journeys across the Antarctic ice. When once asked if he would ever return to the frozen continent, he replied with a smile, "Why do you think I'm in Florida, where it's warm?" What he went on to disclose has captivated researchers and enthusiasts alike, reshaping long-held ideas about Antarctica. His account touched on classified operations, mysterious encounters, and experiences so remarkable that it took him nearly 8 decades to finally speak about them. Johnson's testimony does more than revisit history. It opens the door to a story with the potential to transform how we view one of the most remote places on Earth. Nearly 80 years had passed since Operation Highjump, yet when Chief Robert Johnson finally sat before the camera, the atmosphere shifted. His hands trembled slightly, his voice carried the weight of age, but his words came with clarity, no script, no notes, just memory. "The Admiral and I," he began, "we weren't close. But on that final night he looked at me and said, 'You were there. You know what we saw. Never forget.' Johnson never did." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing as though the past had drawn him back. "There was a mission within the mission," he explained. "Only a handful of us knew. Maybe 24 in total. We were flown out in small groups, never logged officially, and dropped at coordinates that didn't make sense. The team touched down near what appeared to be an ordinary ridge of ice until they felt it. Heat radiated from the surface, and a low vibration filled the air, as though the very atmosphere was alive with energy. They were ordered to investigate. What they discovered was startling: a fissure carved into the ice, narrow yet deliberate. The snow around it had melted in precise geometric shapes, and the opening led into a tunnel, part ice, part something else entirely. It wasn't rock, and it wasn't metal, Johnson recalled. It was both smooth and curved, almost as if it had been engineered. Caution was given, but curiosity overruled. One officer entered. He did not return. Another followed, secured with a line, only to be pulled back unconscious, his eyes open but vacant. He never spoke again, was later discharged, and placed under medical care. Soon after, Johnson's team was evacuated. Days later, the site was destroyed under the explanation of routine testing, though Johnson believed the timing told another story. "Whatever was there," he said, "it wasn't meant to be found." When asked if he thought the discovery was extraterrestrial, Johnson hesitated. "I can't say for certain. It could have been something ancient, something we uncovered rather than created. But it was not natural, and it was not ours." He shared that Admiral Byrd confided in him before the operation ended, shaken and restless, speaking of consequences too great to ignore. Byrd's words echoed in Johnson's memory: "This changes everything we think we know about this world." For decades, Johnson honored his silence. But in his final years, he chose to keep Byrd's request differently by remembering aloud. "I don't need people to believe me," he said. "But I was there. Others were too. Most of them are gone now, but I'm still here. And I promised I wouldn't forget. I never have." To the public, Operation Highjump was presented as a large-scale training mission, a test of endurance in Earth's harshest environment. Yet for those who were there, and for researchers who later examined classified records, the story carried far more weight. The operation's scale alone raised questions. 13 ships, among them the aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea, 33 aircraft, over 4,000 personnel, naval infantry, armored vehicles, and heavy weaponry. An extraordinary force for what was described as a scientific survey. As Cold War archives later revealed, Antarctica was becoming more than an icy wilderness. It was a new frontier with immense strategic value. If any superpower managed to establish a permanent foothold there, it could shift the global balance. And behind the official statements there lingered a deeper concern, the possibility that someone else had already done so. Following World War II, speculation grew that remnants of the German military had escaped to remote strongholds, some said even beneath Antarctic ice. While many accounts were dismissed, intelligence records confirmed that U-boats were tracked moving south long after the war had ended. One even surrendered months later near Argentina. Chief Robert Johnson recalled the atmosphere aboard the fleet. It wasn't fear, he explained, but a constant state of readiness. We knew more was happening than just survival training. Once Admiral Byrd's team reached Antarctica, the mission quickly shifted. Surveillance flights multiplied, and certain ground units were dispatched into regions officially labeled as unstable. One team, Johnson remembered, entered a mountainous area where the snow seemed to melt in unusual, patterned ways, suggesting a warmth beneath the surface that didn't appear to be natural geothermal activity. That team never returned. In the days that followed, Operation Highjump was abruptly brought to an end. Official reports cited severe weather and logistical strain. Yet in private, Byrd and other officers warned that the situation on the ground had grown untenable. Unconfirmed accounts even referenced encounters that were never fully explained. When Byrd returned, those close to him noted a change. He spoke little of the expedition, and his official report was heavily redacted, with sections sealed for decades. Johnson would later recall a private moment aboard ship when Byrd confided, "We saw something out there we weren't supposed to, and now we can't go back." Those words stayed with Johnson for the rest of his life. Whatever Operation Highjump truly uncovered, it was not merely about training, terrain, or tactics. The mission seemed to touch on something larger, an encounter, perhaps even a warning that reshaped how its participants viewed Antarctica. For Johnson, one certainty remained: the continent was far from empty, and what unfolded there was something history has yet to fully acknowledge. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Don't forget to share it with your friends too. It helps the channel out, and I'm excited to continue bringing you more awesome content. The journey to the designated sector tested every limit. Johnson and his small team advanced in tracked vehicles, crawling slowly across vast stretches of ice beneath skies that seemed to press down upon them. At night, they camped beside towering ridges, their tents shuddering in the gusts like fragile paper. The cold seemed alive, moving through layer after layer until it settled deep in their bones. After 4 days, the endless flatness gave way to a harsher landscape. Jagged ridges rose around them, and deep crevasses split the ground. It was here that they came upon it, a fissure wider than a city street, its edges glowing faintly in the dim light. Above it, the air seemed to shimmer, as though warmth was rising where none should exist. Byrd's second-in-command gave the order to secure ropes and begin a descent. Johnson volunteered to go first. The moment he crossed the edge, a sound met him, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through his chest. It wasn't mechanical, yet it carried a steady rhythm, almost like a pulse. As he descended, the ice walls revealed unexpected shapes. Smooth in places, they curved as though intentionally carved. Pockets of warm air brushed his face, carrying scents unfamiliar to Antarctica, earthy, damp, reminiscent of a forest after rainfall. When he reached the bottom, the ice gave way to a cavern floor of polished, dark stone. What unfolded beyond was something Johnson never fully described. He would later say only this: the space was not empty. It had been shaped with intent, the walls bearing markings none of the team could recognize. No signs of recent life were found, yet the place felt aware, quiet, vast, and watchful. Byrd studied the walls in silence, tracing the carvings with his gloved hand. He conferred in hushed tones with his officers, too far for Johnson to hear. Soon after came the order: take photographs, make sketches, and return to the surface. Their journey back to base was subdued. No one spoke of what they had seen. Once aboard, Byrd issued instructions to strike the fissure from official maps, and reports were rewritten before being sent to Washington. Johnson realized then the gravity of what they had uncovered. It was a discovery that challenged every accepted truth about Antarctica, something not meant for the wider world, at least not then. When Operation Highjump was brought to an abrupt close in early 1947, it was as if a curtain had fallen. No official documentaries were produced, no presidential addresses were made, and for more than a decade there were no comparable missions to Antarctica. Silence replaced what had once been one of the largest expeditions in naval history. Admiral Byrd surfaced only once more, during a final press conference in South America. Observers noted a change in his demeanor. He appeared weary, his words more measured than before. In that address, now famous among researchers, he warned of a new power capable of crossing from pole to pole at extraordinary speeds. Yet soon after, the interview faded from view. The footage was rarely seen again, transcripts were edited, and Byrd's statement slipped into obscurity, reduced to a minor Cold War footnote. But questions lingered. Not all records from Operation Highjump were ever made public. Significant portions of the mission's logs, aerial surveys, and Navy footage remain unreleased to this day. Freedom of Information Act requests uncovered references to documents that were reportedly lost in transit, damaged in archival floods, or else stamped with a classification that had no expiration. Chief Robert Johnson never forgot the reports that later went missing because he had seen them himself. There were photographs. He recalled, aerial shots we took on a clear day. No clouds, no storms. And yet there were structures, geometric patterns in the ice, openings, even what looked like massive doors. Those images, however, disappeared from the official record. Other documents vanished too, flight logs from downed aircraft, incident reports, and even full personnel lists. Some names of crew members were erased, as though they had never taken part in the mission at all. From the sudden end of Operation Highjump in 1947 until his death a decade later, Admiral Byrd never led another Antarctic mission of that scale. When he spoke publicly, his comments focused on weather studies or base construction, and whenever questions turned to Highjump, he changed the subject. The government kept the same silence, shifting attention elsewhere. Then, in 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was signed, declaring the continent a zone for peaceful science, no weapons, no military activity, and no mention of what had come before. To Johnson, the treaty was more than diplomacy. They wanted it sealed, he said. Untouchable. Because whatever we discovered, they couldn't allow it to be found again. Over the years, Johnson watched Operation Highjump fade into history. Byrd's name became a textbook entry, and speculation was dismissed as rumor. Yet Johnson carried the weight of what he knew, aware of how carefully the truth had been buried. At times he said it felt like living in two different histories, the version the world accepted and the one he had lived. For nearly 8 decades he stayed silent, not out of fear, but because he believed no one was ready. Only at the end of his life did he decide the time had come. Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd was more than a decorated officer. He embodied the early 20th century's hunger for discovery. He first entered national headlines in 1926 with his claim of flying over the North Pole. Whether the details were exact mattered little, the public wanted heroes and Byrd fit the role. He wore the Medal of Honor with quiet pride, spoke with precision, and carried himself with the composure of a man who had wrestled with nature and lived to tell it. He moved between worlds with ease, briefing politicians on polar research one day, thrilling lecture halls the next. Newspapers adored him. His fur-lined parka face sold papers, and his words stirred readers. Yet those who knew him best saw that behind the charm was a deeper pull, not arrogance but an unrelenting drive toward the unknown. For Byrd, exploration was not about planting flags but entering spaces where questions grew heavier than answers. Nowhere did this hunger burn more than in Antarctica. His first Antarctic expedition in 1928 was celebrated as a triumph. He returned with maps, data, and dramatic photographs, but privately hinted at things left unsaid. Something there gnawed at him. And though the world celebrated his success, Byrd was already preparing to return. Each expedition grew larger and more guarded. Officially, they were about science and mapping, but inside, secrecy tightened. Certain discussions happened behind closed doors, and certain maps never appeared in reports. By the late 1930s, Byrd was both celebrated and mysterious. To the public, he was the daring adventurer. Inside the Navy, it was understood that his Antarctic work had uncovered matters requiring discretion. Rumors spread of strategic resources, uranium, and even stranger anomalies in navigation and magnetism. Byrd did little to encourage or dismiss these whispers. He had reached a point where he chose not only his missions but his men. Skills mattered, but loyalty mattered more. Journalists found his operations harder to cover. Politicians met polite evasions. To the public, he remained the heroic explorer, but to those closer, the expeditions carried shadows. By 1939, as Byrd prepared for another mission under the U.S. Antarctic Service, secrecy deepened. Classified documents circulated, maps hinted at unexplained targets, and the Navy's hand was heavier than usual. Those close to the planning sensed the mission was not just about weather stations and mapping. It was about returning to something Byrd had already found, a presence or truth that had gripped him for over a decade. Recruitment began quietly, without fanfare. The men chosen did not know the full purpose, only that they served under Admiral Byrd. For 19-year-old Robert Johnson, one question lingered above all. What truth was Byrd guarding so closely that only a select few could be trusted to see it? Antarctica in the 1940s was more than a frozen wasteland. It was a continent of mystery, holding resources powerful enough to shift the balance of global power. Beneath the endless ice lay uranium, coal, and minerals that could fuel empires for centuries. Every nation knew control of Antarctica meant control of untapped wealth and strategic advantage. When Admiral Byrd led expeditions between 1928 and 1956, the world was edging into the Cold War. To the public, his missions looked like heroic quests for science. To world leaders, they were a contest for sovereignty over the last unclaimed continent larger than the United States and Mexico combined. A frozen crown at the bottom of the world. America sent Byrd as its champion in this high-stakes struggle. Robert Johnson, now speaking after decades of silence, recalled Antarctica as a place that bent the rules of nature itself. His hands trembled as he described being young and unprepared for the psychological toll. The continent had a way of changing people, he said, forcing them to question everything they thought they knew. He remembered the silence that drove men to the edge of madness, broken only by the thunder of shifting ice. Survival meant more than enduring the deadly cold, it meant confronting a landscape that resisted explanation. Johnson described areas where compasses spun, where the aurora australis moved in deliberate patterns, and where the ice itself glowed with an inner light. These were not hallucinations of exhausted men. Multiple crew members recorded the same events, their accounts haunting in their consistency. During the 1939 to 1941 United States Antarctic Service expedition, Johnson witnessed phenomena immediately classified as top secret. The ice concealed caverns, geological anomalies, and formations unlike anything known. His most vivid memory was of a vast crevasse, its glowing walls radiating warmth in the heart of Antarctica. It seemed less like frozen terrain than a threshold into the Earth itself. Johnson's testimony suggests Byrd's expeditions uncovered a continent far stranger than the world was told. Antarctica was no longer just a scientific frontier, it had become a place of secrets guarded with the highest discretion, its mystery shaping the course of polar exploration and the geopolitics that followed. For decades, Chief Robert Johnson was just another name among the thousands who served during the Cold War. But when the roster of Operation Highjump veterans was released in the 1990s, one detail stood out: Johnson was the last survivor. Born in 1924 in Norfolk, Virginia, he enlisted at 18. Practical and loyal, he was considered unremarkable, which may have been exactly why he was chosen. Men like him didn't ask questions. Yet after Operation Highjump, something shifted. He served another 20 years, then retired quietly. No memoirs, no interviews, no reunions. He built a life in logistics and never spoke of Antarctica, not to friends, not even to family, until his 99th birthday. That was when he finally broke his silence. "I'm not trying to prove anything," he said from his Virginia home. "I'm just trying to leave the truth behind." The truth he shared was not sensational. He never mentioned aliens or saucers, but his testimony aligned with fragments in declassified files. He spoke of the low hum beneath the ice, a patrol that vanished, and the night Admiral Byrd entered the communications tent pale and shaken, refusing to record a flight path he had just flown. Johnson recalled being assigned to a small security detail guarding what was described as a weather station but was clearly something else. It had stairs in the middle of a glacier, he said. I know concrete when I see it. An officer tried to photograph it, his camera was seized, and days later he was abruptly discharged without even packing his bag. After Byrd's final press conference, Johnson was reassigned stateside. He buried the memories, but they lingered. Decades later, when the internet was filled with rumors and conspiracy theories, he watched them all. Most he dismissed. But a few he admitted, a few got close. Asked why he chose to speak after so many years, Johnson grew emotional. Because people deserve to know. And because I'm tired of carrying someone else's silence. I didn't sign up to be a liar. His voice, weathered by a century of restraint, carried the weight of things left unspoken for far too long. Operation Highjump slipped from memory almost as soon as it ended. Historians noted it briefly. Documentaries skimmed its surface, but the real story was buried beneath decades of secrecy and snow. Now, Chief Robert Johnson is the last voice remaining. His testimony reveals how far governments will go to bury the truth and how long one man can carry it. Johnson never pretended to have all the answers. He didn't sell his story or seek attention. He spoke only once to a small team of researchers with a single camera, quietly supported by a historical archive. No media, no sponsors, just his truth. When I look back, he said, I don't think we were meant to understand what we found. We weren't ready then. Maybe we're not even ready now. That may be the heart of the mystery, not what they saw, but what it meant. Was it alien, ancient, the remnant of a lost civilization, or the edge of technology far beyond human grasp? Whatever it was, it shook Admiral Byrd, silenced a naval task force, and left a young sailor with a burden he carried for nearly 80 years. Johnson's final words were not dramatic, but clear. People think the Cold War was fought with bombs and spies, but I saw another kind of war. One no one wrote about, one that's still hidden. That's the part that should scare us the most. Today, Antarctica is sealed by international treaties. Officially, there are no military bases and no resource extraction, only science. Johnson believed otherwise. They're not protecting the land, he said. They're protecting what's under it. The legacy of Operation Highjump isn't just in naval records or lost flight logs. It's in the gap between what we're told and what we'll never be allowed to know. It lingers in the eyes of a man who waited nearly a century to speak, still uncertain if he should. And it echoes in the silence of Admiral Byrd, whose final years were spent in near total privacy, his most famous mission reduced to whispers and half-truths. Now, with Johnson's voice, that silence is broken. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for being with us. Leave a comment, like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button for more exciting videos. See you next time.